The scripture from Luke 9:28 through 36. Now about 8 days after these sayings, Jesus took him with Peter, John, and James, and went up to the mountain to pray. And while praying, his appearance of his face changed, and the clothes came dazzling white. Suddenly they saw two men, Moses and Elijah, talking to him. They appeared in the glory and were speaking of his departure, which was about to accomplish at Jerusalem. Now Peter and his companions were weighed down with sleep. But since they had stayed awake, they saw his glory, and the two men stood with him. Just as they were leaving him, Peter said to Jesus, "Master, it is good for us to be here. Let us make 3 dwellings, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah," not knowing what he had said. When he was saying this, a cloud came and overshadowed them. They were terrified as they entered the cloud. From the cloud came a voice that said, "This is my son, my chosen. Listen to him." When the voice had spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they kept silent in those days and told no one any of the things they had seen. On the next day, when they had come down from the mountain, a great crowd met him. Just as a man from the crowd shouted, "Teacher, I beg you to look at my son. He is my only child." Suddenly a spirit seized him, and at once he shrieks. It throws him into convulsions until he foams at the mouth. It mauls him and scarcely leaves him. I begged your disciples to cast it out, but they could not. Jesus answered, "You faithless and preserved generation, how much longer must I bear with you? Bring your son here." While he was coming, a demon dashed him to the ground in convulsions, but Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit, healed the boy, and gave him back to his father. And all were astonished at the greatness of God. Hear what the Spirit is saying to the church. Amen.
I'm a junior in high school, so the biggest thing in my life right now is college. Getting into college, figuring out what I want to major in, and where I want to go to. College tours make this process slightly easier and can be decently fun. I like college kids, and I like the various stores and clubs, and even some classes or programs that they talk about. Last summer, I toured Duke. I sat down in the nice leather chairs and listened as our speaker, Harold, go on about how to become a Blue Devil. Harold started by telling everyone how amazing Duke was and how many programs they had and clubs and other opportunities offered to the students on campus. I was getting kind of into it, nodding my head like, "Yeah, sounds good, Harold. Where do I sign up?" But then we moved into the application process. I won't get into specifics, but my GPA was nowhere near what they were looking for incoming Blue Devils. So my hopes were short-lived, all of about 3 minutes, where I allowed myself to daydream about actually attending Duke. After the presentation, we toured the campus. It was beautiful. North Carolina in June, when the flowers are in full bloom, the trees frame the road, nice benches to study on, and just a certain feeling in the air. It was intoxicating. Now I should say we were there mainly for my brother, who was 1 year older and a more likely candidate than I would ever be. After the tour was over, I ended up leaving campus decently happy, even though Harold had killed my dreams. For one reason and one reason alone. I got a t-shirt. Later on, as I thought about Duke, I was trying to figure out what appealed to me the most. The campus was undoubtedly beautiful and had an academic feeling about it. I also liked the thought of saying I graduated from Duke and watching people's reactions. Not to rip on Duke or anything, because it's an amazing school, but Duke is fairly materialistic. They maintain the cleanliness and overall tidiness of their campus almost to ensure all visitors that the prestige of their school is well-deserved. When I toured Duke, I was more caught up in the name of the school than the actual valuable learning experiences they could offer. Overall, going to Duke was a great experience. When I toured Duke, I was more caught up in the name of, Not only because I learned that some kids do actually study and work while they're at college, but because I learned that I needed to focus on what actually matters. Not getting a t-shirt from an elite school, but finding a good fit for myself at the next school I would be attending. Material things are tough because at the surface level, they seem so valuable. Duke was so visually appealing, it distracted me from the materialism and elitism that was so strong within those Ivy League walls. In Jesus' transfiguration, the disciples got distracted by wanting to honor and mark the spot where Jesus was affirmed by building a monument. They forgot about Jesus' true message, to help our neighbors, when a boy needed their help at the bottom of the mountain. They got caught up in the elitism by trying to build a place that would be only for them. They wanted a place that was dedicated to Jesus, where they could live happily secluded on this mountain. We can't judge the disciples, though, because we've all been distracted by material things and forgotten our two true tasks. The disciples were trying to create this monument which not only served as a symbol for where Jesus was affirmed, but be a place where they could stay and worship. They were scared to move on to a new place to face what comes next. They had spent time on that mountain, numerous days with their friends where they were safe and happy. Why would you ever want to leave? They wanted something more substantial that wouldn't easily change, but Jesus knew they had to move on. He knew that they had to face what awaited them at the bottom of the mountain. Just below them in a crowd, a boy suffered from seizures, and his father begged the disciples to help. We've all been there, though. Sometimes we have to step out of our comfort zones. We have to give up things to have new experiences. Deep down, the disciples probably knew that they couldn't stay forever on that mountain, that they would most likely never come back. But they just wanted another day, more good times with their treasured friends, before they would be pulled back down. Although Jesus was right in the fact that they shouldn't lose sight of what's truly important, I feel like we should all be able to understand the disciples' perspective as well. Now, there's probably some Duke grad out there in the audience who is extremely offended by my sermon. So I apologize. It's truly an awesome school. But even though I didn't go to Duke, I think we can agree that we've allowed certain things to take precedence over others that may not necessarily be as important. Materialism is extremely prevalent in all of our lives. Jesus was afraid that when he left us, unimportant things would distract us and we'd lose sight of what and who is important, which is a legitimate fear considering how long it took me to write this sermon. But it's 2016, the world hasn't ended, and even though materialism has grown significantly, I would argue that we'll be okay as long as we remember what's truly important, which is the people around us. There are so many sick boys out there in the world, people who need our help, who get ignored by others. We have a responsibility to do what we can, heal as many as possible. Distractions are inevitable, but if we can focus and concentrate on what's important, helping our neighbors, healing the sick, we can accomplish great things.
Every day, we're presented with obstacles that just sometimes are too big for us to overcome. I mean, sure, I can play an instrument, but I couldn't play a full orchestral piece. And this summer, I had the immense pleasure of going on our senior high's work camp retreat. Now, for those of you who may be visiting our church today or otherwise just aren't quite familiar with what work camp is, it's a one-week outing taken by our senior high youth, in which we go to communities around the nation that need our help, and, well, we help, and we do work. We build and repair houses, we dig ditches to prevent flooding, whatever the people in the community need. Well, we get to Kentucky, and I have no idea how to do anything related to that. But we all worked with one another, and the people leading my site taught me so much. All of the work we did, I definitely couldn't do that alone. On our site, we had to repair one floor, retile another, tear down and replace a wall, and dig a ditch all in a week. I couldn't do that in a year. Look at me. I'm thin. But together, we managed to accomplish so much, and I felt like we were actually making a difference among the community. And we all face these obstacles so much. They can be mental, emotional, and physical. And this is addressed in tonight's passage when they say, "We asked your disciples to heal the boy themselves, but they could not do it. A boy in the town was possessed, and not everyone is the son of God. Not everyone can just casually perform an exorcism. In our lives, we can't just accomplish everything. You may find yourself needing a little bit of help, a little bit of assistance to get to that next point in your life. And that's not a bad thing. We grow up and we're gradually taught to be more and more independent. And the problem with this is that we grow to take that as if asking for help is something to be ashamed of. Even in other teachings, such as those of Greek mythology, the story of and feeling of hopelessness and a need for help are prevalent. Atlas being forced to bear the burden of the world upon his shoulders for the rest of humanity. Sisyphus being forced by the vengeful gods to roll a boulder up a large hill, but he just didn't have the strength, and when he finally gets that close, his strength fails him and the boulder tumbles down. He tries so desperately, but one person obviously can't accomplish that task. And we've all felt like that, faced with an impossible task and forced to go through it alone. It's this feeling of helplessness that we find gripping our daily lives, and sometimes we're either afraid or unable to take action and find the help that we need. And even Jesus didn't do what he needed in the story presented tonight alone. He was visited by the spirits of Moses and Elijah, who helped and consoled him of his coming betrayal. We are always taught that Jesus is fully divine and fully human, but when he just goes around turning water into wine, or turning a few loaves and fishes into 1,000, or saving the blind, it seems hard to believe that he was anything but divine. He appears to us as this perfect human being, having the perfect reason for everything, having a way to fix everything. But this is one of those few moments where you can see his human features. And we can just see that no one, not even the Son of God, can go through life without this help.